Hello everybody, my name is Ray. Welcome to the Evangelical Dark Web. Today we will be following up on the last video I did on Ravi Zacharias. It would appear that now we have the full report of Ravi Zacharias' misdeeds. So now we will dive into that report and see if that updates our initial findings. As I said in the last video, I said there was not enough evidence to prove that he was a false teacher based on his apparent unrepentant sin. And that was because I didn't want to make that assumption based on incomplete evidence. Because I don't want to assume what was in the report. And just a high level observation, this report actually wasn't as bad as I thought it would be. So there's that, but it's actually really bad. On the other hand, it's actually pretty bad. But I actually thought I was prepared for it to be a lot worse. All right, so let's dive into the report. We confirmed one of 3 accounts described in Christianity Today and found significant evidence of sexual misconduct involving additional massage therapists. So the Christianity Today article had 3 accounts, and I believe the only reason they were able to confirm 1 out of 3 was the fact that only 1 came forward for this investigation. So I believe that was their explanation for that 33%. With over 200 massage therapist contacts in Ravi Zacharias' phones, including many overseas, we did not think it worthwhile to attempt an exhaustive survey and instead sought to speak with those we thought most likely to have relevant information or who otherwise reached out to us. So, you want to talk about binders full of women. Ravi Zacharias had binders full of women. He had a phone book going on, over 200 contacts across various continents. And those are just the people who had phones. And, I'm not trying to say that, certain people were too poor to have phones, but I am trying to say that some of these contacts might have been pimps or something like that. And they didn't contact all of them, especially the ones overseas. Like, we talked a lot in this report about Thailand and countries like that. So, who knows how exhaustive they went in contacting his contacts in those parts of the world. The scope of our engagement did not extend to RZIM finances, possible retaliation against employees, or other aspects of the organization's culture. So one of the key findings in this report is that RZIM, to some capacity, funded Ravi Zacharias' misdeeds. So that's one of the key findings in this report. Similarly, we did not find evidence that anyone within RZIM or on its board knew that Ravi Zacharias had engaged in misconduct. So this actually exonerates the board of RZIM, which I believe is the funder of this investigation. Keep that in mind. And I actually do believe that a lot of these people were innocent and that the people on the board were probably unaware of all that was going on. As we go down, it'll become more apparent that Ravi Zacharias was actually pretty good. He was pretty tech savvy for someone up there in years. He knew to use encrypted messaging. He knew to, he had multiple devices. And as we'll see, there's like a 3-year gap where there's nothing because he deleted it. Now we're going through the methodology, and this just describes how they interviewed how they went through the devices and stuff like that. It talks about the gaps between, like when information was deleted from his phones. There are significant gaps for the time we do not have the benefit of any mobile devices, including the 3-year period. And then we get into Lorianne Thompson, who was the known accuser of Ravi Zacharias in 2017. I will discuss her more in detail because this report goes more in detail on that allegation. So now we're describing Ravi Zacharias' involvement in spas. So one of the things that's clear is that Ravi Zacharias was an investor in these spas, not necessarily the day-to-day manager. And that was pretty clear. And that the massage therapists seemed to think they knew he was an owner by investment. And Ravi Zacharias rode that reputation. He told one of the massage therapists he was a silent investor for both spas. However, it does not appear that he was listed on all the corporate documents. And as someone who's very interested in corporate bylaws for more than most people, I actually found that pretty interesting. Multiple witnesses told us that he arranged for massage therapists he met in Asia to train the Jivan wellness staff in those techniques, and one told us that he tried to recruit her from Thailand to work at the spa. So, he's recruiting talent overseas, bringing them back, and I gotta think that the talent that's overseas, or the women that are overseas that he's recruiting, there was probably something sexual going on there. That's a hunch. That's certainly an implication that you can, or that is an inference you can make by reading this report. So now here are the details and the findings. 8 massage therapists reported that Mr. Ravi Zacharias would start the massage either completely nude or would remove the sheets during the massage. 6 therapists reported that he would always or almost always had an erection during the massage. 4 therapists reported that he would either touch his genitals or ask them to touch his genitals. And 5 therapists reported that he touched or rubbed them inappropriately. So not only is Ravi Zacharias getting nude and asking them to pleasure him, give him a happy ending as it's called, he's also touching them inappropriately. So, and again, he is a minister of the gospel and he's a married man. So these are 2 factors that weigh in heavily on how we should view this situation. And then it talks about how the women would push back on these unwanted advances. Some therapists reported even more serious and sustained sexual assaults that evolved over time. 2 therapists obliged his request to masturbate him, telling one of them it was necessary because his pain was ligamental. Now, a ligament is a tissue on the body that connects bone to bone. Just saying. So, yeah, that's pretty sleazy. While 5 women reported that he touched and grabbed their legs, 2 said he eventually went beyond that with them, rubbing their breasts and genitals. So Ravi Zacharias is getting a happy ending and he's getting handsy. That's what this report is detailing. And that's kind of what, the initial impression of a scandal involving massage parlors entails. Like, this was what I assumed was going on. That he was using his employees to get happy ending massages. Obviously, doing inappropriate touching on top of that, sexual assault, as we would call it, is an extra layer of evil on these deeds. There's actually even more. Only one of the witnesses we interviewed said that Mr. Zacharias engaged in sexual intercourse. The witness reported details of many encounters over a period of years that she described as rape. So that's kind of the biggest finding in this report, is that Ravi Zacharias is alleged to have raped someone in a continued course of conduct. That's a key element. So it's not just a one and done. This is a continued course of conduct over years. And again, he is not only a married man, he is a minister. And the report details that they protect the identity of this woman. And as I said in the last video regarding Ravi Zacharias, he is dead. He is a historical figure. He is not entitled to a trial. Therefore, we will examine this evidence as though he is a historical figure. Therefore, he does not need to be able to respond to these allegations for us to accept them as truth. The witness told us that their relationship began as a normal massage therapist-client relationship, and that she came to think of him as a father figure. He elicited information about her faith and her financial situation. She reported that after he arranged for the ministry to provide her with financial support, he required sex from her. According to the witness, Mr. Zacharias used religious expressions to gain compliance, as she was raised to be a person of faith. She reported that he made her pray with him to thank God for the opportunity they both received. So what we're detailing now is Ravi Zacharias's his grooming, I think we should call it. So, he actually gets to know these people. Like, he's not just, well, obviously he is just whipping his penis out. Obviously he's whipping his penis out for these massages, but he's actually getting to know these women, and he's trying to like cultivate a bond so that he can kind of exploit that bond. And that's what's going on here. And he's also, there's financial support, and it's, heavily supported in this report that the RIZM money is being used to support Ravi Zacharias' sexual assault. Some therapists described a process that began as a probing conversation and him asking about their families and backgrounds. So like I said, he's trying to get in their heads emotionally so he can take advantage of them sexually. Mr. Zacharias also used his ministry to financially support some of his long-term therapists. Touch of Hope was a humanitarian effort on the part of RZIM, meeting short-term needs for long-term gains. We learned it was purely discretionary fund. It was purely a discretionary fund and no clear guidelines governing how the money would be granted. So he basically had a slush fund called Touch of Hope for his deeds. This was his prostitute fund. And, if you donated to RZIM, or specifically this Touch of Hope ministry that they had going, you were supporting Ravi Zacharias' misdeeds. You were supporting his sinful lifestyle. And that honestly has to hurt anyone who gave to this ministry, because they were they were deceived into supporting Ravi Zacharias' sin. So now we get into the part of this report about Lori-Ann Thompson. She is a major feature in this report. And in the previous video, I estimated that this was some, like, using Ravi Zacharias' defense, I estimated that this was some sort of honeypot thing. But one thing that was clear to me then was Lori-Ann Thompson was not a victim. And this report actually confirms my suspicion of this incident. Not necessarily that it was a honeypot, but this was an affair. And, with an affair, there are two guilty parties. While they were never physically intimate, Miss Thompson alleged that they engaged in an emotional relationship through electronic communication that culminated into him asking for photographs of her, including nudes, which she sent. In order to avoid protracted and public litigation, on April 27, 2017, the Thompsons, plural, sent Mr. Zacharias a letter demanding $5 million in exchange for a release of the claims against him and the ministry. So what does this sound like? This sounds like two people who were having an adulterous affair. She's married, and sending another married man nudes. That's unacceptable. That's unacceptable behavior. She's not a victim. Her husband is perhaps a victim of her, not of Ravi Zacharias, but of her, because she's sending nudes of herself to another man, but she's not a victim. And I hate the fact that, like Julie Roys, I just talked about her reporting on John MacArthur, and Julie Roys is trying to tout Miss Thompson as a victim when she's clearly engaged in an adulterous affair. She's not a victim. Neither is Ravi Zacharias. Obviously, my assumption is that they're both guilty and they were having an affair. They couldn't keep it secret for long. So, they were each trying to get their exit strategy to shut the other person up. That's what this sounds like. And, that's when the lawsuits start flying. And in the end, there's an NDA. And this report details how we can't really make too many inferences about what went on in this situation because there's a non-disclosure agreement. So the non-disclosure agreement really hides a lot of the details here. But obviously, Ravi Zacharias is guilty. But I'm not going to pretend like Lori-Ann Thompson is innocent. She is an adulteress. So this is how the report concludes this section on Lori-Ann Thompson. We have reviewed the evidence and communications that are publicly available and some documents provided to us by witnesses. But because we did not have access to the primary evidence that would have allowed us to reach meaningful conclusions, we cannot conclusively say whether Mr. Zacharias solicited nudes or any other photographs of Miss Thompson. However, we found significant evidence on Mr. Zacharias' electronic devices that are probative of her allegations discussed below. So like I said, I think it's very likely Ravi Zacharias sought nudes from her. But what's clear is that she sent him photographs back. And, you're not innocent. She's not a victim. She is a willing participant. She's an adulteress. And I have no problem calling out both sides on that. Obviously, the focus of this is on Ravi Zacharias and how this report changes how we view his legacy, not only as a person, but as a teacher of the gospel. Is he a false teacher or not? Is basically the question we are re-asking ourselves. Okay, so now we're getting into the details of his text. So we have a lot of innocuous terms that, older people tend to use, like dear, sweetheart. But now we're getting a little bit more graphic. There's one instance where it describes how he had a very intimate, overseas texting back and forth relationship with a woman. He told her, "I know more than ever that you have become the love of my life. I'm waiting to hold you close to my heart again. Please be safe, my angel. I love you, and good night from here." He told her to keep him as the only one in your heart. I love you, my dearest XXX. I assume that is the name being redacted. Their communications imply that the relationship had a physical component. Again, we're using electronic records to corroborate a physical act. But it's clear that Ravi Zacharias was an adulterer. He, cheated on his wife not only with Lorianne Thompson, but also several other women. And that's what this report details. This woman, so now we get the text from another person is like, and it notes, this woman received significant financial support from Touch of Hope. So now we kind of get into some details involving, Ravi Zacharias. He's wise enough to know to use encrypted messaging services and had several phones. So now we get into the photograph section of this. And what's clear is that Ravi Zacharias had a large spank bank, as it's called. However, there were not as many nudes as I would have thought. I thought that was kind of I was surprised that this report, all these electronic communications, but Ravi Zacharias's photo collection is relatively tame. Or a lot tamer than I would have anticipated. I would have thought he had, binders full of women, specifically their nudes. This guy was collecting. But that doesn't really appear to be the case. Mr. Zacharias' phones contained over 200 photographs of women much younger than him, including 6 of Lorianne Thompson, and dozens of photographs he took of himself. For some of these women, he had only 1 or 2 pictures. However, some of the women appeared in multiple photographs over time. Among the more significant collections are 17 images of a young Thai woman who appears to be in her mid-20s, described in the previous section. So that's the person he was having that textual affair with. 43 images of a young Indian woman who appears to be in her early 20s. 42 images of a blonde woman who appears to be in her mid-30s and appears to work at a spa or salon also. And then 52 images and 4 videos of a young Malaysian woman who appears to be in her early 20s, taken over a 2-year period. He received photographs from 3 different women over just 2 days in July of 2018. It's worth noting again that there are substantial periods of time for which there are no phones to review, including the almost 3-year gap between October 2014 and July 2017. In majority of these photographs, the women are fully clothed and posing as anyone would for a selfie. And then it describes some of the more graphic and pornographic images that he received, such as from this woman in Malaysia. However, the photographs grew increasingly more suggestive, culminating into 2 photographs showing her bare breasts, dated October 27, 2018, and a video of her fully naked and touching herself, dated January 8, 2019. 2 other women told us that Mr. Zacharias asked for nude photographs, which they refused to provide. Then the report wants to get into how Mr. Zacharias would respond to these findings. And it kind of uses his past offenses. And the report pretty much kind of like, it says what Ravi Zacharias would say to defend himself, and then it just points out, yeah, this dude has binders full of women, both contacts and images, and then has multiple testimonies against him that involve adulterous acts. So, now we reach our conclusion. Our investigation was limited to Mr. Zacharias' sexual misconduct. And even as to that issue, it was not. So now we have reached the conclusion of this report. Our investigation was limited to Mr. Zacharias' sexual misconduct. And even as to that issue, it was not exhaustive. We acknowledge that we have not spoken to all individuals who may have relevant information to provide. We strive to balance the need for completeness with the need for expediency. We are confident that we have uncovered sufficient evidence to conclude that Mr. Zacharias engaged in sexual misconduct. And that they did. We can clearly see from this report that he engaged in sexual misconduct over a period of time far more recent than we previously thought. So that's pretty bad. That actually shows a high amount of unrepentance in Ravi Zacharias' life. You could easily argue, using this report, using the other evidence that I have compiled, that to say that Ravi Zacharias was unregenerate, that Ravi Zacharias was not saved. And that, I think, is a conclusion we can now make. Whereas we could not make that conclusion without the full findings, because we don't want to make a conclusion based off evidence we have not, based on a report that's incomplete. We can now make this conclusion based on a report that's completed, and it's bad. And it sucks that Ravi Zacharias has impacted many people's lives only to be revealed in the end. But I think this is just something that happens to Christians, and unfortunately, like I said in the last video, I can relate to this type of situation. And I talked about how the man who baptized me would end up leaving the church because he had an adulterous relationship and did not want to come back from that. And I understand how this would hurt people. I also think that situations like this are why we cannot have this celebrity culture surrounding evangelicalism go on. Because not everyone that we are raising up to be a pope, an evangelical pope, I should say, is worthy of that honor. And Ravi Zacharias, obviously not worthy of being a minister of the gospel. He was clearly unqualified to be in this position. So, do I think Ravi Zacharias is a false teacher? Yes. So, my name is Ray. This is the Evangelical Dark Web. The Evangelical Dark Web is a ministry designed to combat false gospels, most specifically the social justice gospel, prosperity gospel, and this popularity gospel. Now, in doing so, we examine false teachers or potential false teachers upon reader request. And Ravi Zacharias is a false teacher that readers have requested that I write about. And yeah, initially I didn't want to do it because he was dead, but obviously these findings are significant and deserve to be written about. So if you want more content like this, subscribe to the channel. Also subscribe to evangelicaldarkweb.org. That link will be in the description below. And share this video to get the word out, to get a more detailed breakdown of the report, as well as to help independent Christian content creators rise above the algorithms which are not designed to help us out. So have a blessed day, and I will catch you on the next one.